some technical difficulties tonight, but we are now live. I'll give it a few minutes so that everyone can jump on here. But welcome. So this is our official first day of the Yoga Sutras. So yesterday we had a little intro to what the sutras are all about and some different books and some general overlay of concepts. And tonight we'll start that first study. And in the course, hopefully you've gotten registered at FigLeaf.Yoga.com. So in the course, the mini course of the Yoga Sutras, there is an audio that does a little 10-minute audio talking about the sutras. There's also a PDF that has a separate and additional flow of some written content to supplement that as well. And then these videos will then go into those as well, so you'll be able to reference them in order in the future. So, hey Larissa, thanks for joining. So normally on Thursdays, we are doing our Balanced Goddess coaching call. And we normally are doing that from 8 to 10, just because it's so much fun. We really get to our girl chats. And so after this, we are going to be utilizing the Facebook groups setting. There's a new, or it's chat or something of that sort. We were playing with it yesterday with some friends. So after this, we're going to pop into one of those groups. So I'll get that right afterwards. And we can pop in and we're all on video. And we just get to do a video chat and have a little community powwow. So I'll remind you again of that as we get into our Yoga Sutras chat for tonight. So this is the book that I will be referencing, and you don't have to have this book in order to do the study, because I will be going through it pretty thoroughly, as well as your resources too. So we're tonight going to be, and just so that you can see it in case you don't have a copy, this is why it's so important to have a study when we do the Yoga Sutras, because there are over 200 sutras, or roughly about, in this book. And this book is broken into 4 books. And we're going to be just briefly studying part of book 1 within those 4 books. And so within the Yoga Sutras, it'll have the Sanskrit, then it'll have how to say the Sanskrit, and then it has the breakdown. So for number 1, it says Atha Yoga Nun Asanam. And Atha means now, Yoga means yoga. And Anusasanam means exposition or instructions. That translation means now the exposition of yoga is made. And then there is a brief little thing of what that means. And then I'm going to expound on that. So that's how this works. Basically what happened is all the students of yoga that were listening to the teachings of Patanjali took notes, and they put in here a compilation of all of the main notes. And so just like if you were in class and you wrote down some brief little notes, if you were in class, you would know what that means. If you were not in class, you would kind of only get a brief idea. So that's where I'm here to help explain that for you. So the main point that we want to take away in book 1, verse 1 is that we cannot reach the goal by mere words alone. And so this is really any philosophy, any concept. A lot of times we get so wrapped up in the concept that we almost feel as if we're doing it. And I'll put this into modern white girl American terms. You can't just scroll on Instagram and watch the yogis and watch the exercise videos and expect to get fit. You can know how to do all of them. You could tell someone what to do, But if you are not practicing it yourself, you're not going to get fit. You're not going to get those results, right? Give me a little woot woot. Okay. All right. So really, like, the philosophy and almost every religion or any text says faith, study, practice. All right. I'm pretty sure like every religion or philosophy will say the same: faith, study, practice. And so we're here saying, like, there's study and there's practice. And so again, with yoga, with a healthy lifestyle, with anything spiritual or any change that you want to make, any of that, there's the philosophy, and you can, thank you, you can know the philosophy, and oftentimes we find ourselves in that philosophy and giving other people advice who's been there. I've done it before too, I'm not gonna lie, where you'll give people advice, but you're not practicing it yourself. And while you're saying it, you're going, maybe I should be doing that too. And then maybe even feel guilty. And a lot of times we have our values and what we believe to be true, but we're not in line with that. We're not practicing our own values. And that's where we get really torn. And that's where pain and suffering and feeling like we're not on track with life, or we're not living out our purpose, a lot of that stuff comes about just by that very simple problem of we're preaching our values, we have our values in our heart, and we're not living them. And so if you're taking notes, I really urge you to come back to this, because in coaching, counseling, anything of that sort, this is always something they will address. Is your values in line with your philosophy, with your own values? Are you practicing what you preach? Okay, so mere philosophy will not satisfy us. We cannot reach the goal by mere words alone. And I have a lovely quote. I don't know who said it, but it said, you cannot cross the river just by staring at it. And it's the same concept. So that's verse 1. Verse 2. So it's starting to introduce some yoga words that have their own concepts to them. And this is from the Vedic scriptures, and you will also find this in a book called Yoga and Ayurveda. So it's really talking about how yoga is going to be referenced and how the mind is going to be referenced. So it breaks down the mind. Okay. So if the restraint of the mental modifications is achieved, one has reached the goal of yoga. And so this is where a lot of people start to go, what? Because I thought yoga was physical postures. And again, we're studying classic yoga, not hatha yoga, which was primarily the postures. This is talking about the combination of the mind and the body. And this actually goes far more into the mind, because the mind is why we practice the physical postures. If the restraint of the mental modifications is achieved, one has reached the goal of yoga. This is the entire science of yoga. This is what it's all based on. If you cannot control the rising of the mind into ripples, or if you can control the rising of the mind into ripples, then you will experience yoga. And there's often this analogy of water and the mind. So the mind is this rushing river, and the mind gets very turbulent. And I use often in a lot of my meditations of, okay, imagine if you were going to, off of a ship, dive into the ocean, and there's a big storm going on. And you're getting caught up in this storm, but then you go a little deeper and you're still feeling the currents, but it's not as bad. And you go a little deeper and it's only very subtle. And then you get down into the stillness. And so that's one analogy. Another analogy is this river of thoughts, and you're going to pull yourself out of the river and sit on the bank. And so these analogies of water and the mind, which is quite brilliant because our brain is actually like 80% water. And so that's why, like, if you're dehydrated, you're going to get a headache, or mental fog, or your brain's just not going to function as well. And so this analogy of water is quite interesting. But it's saying that if we have the stillness of the mind, where we're not in this turbulence, and instead of the mind into waves, what if a thought came in and it just only made some ripples, and we were able to examine that thought, because the thought isn't going to overtake us, right? Then we're in control of the thought. So we've learned how to observe our thoughts, and that we recognize that we are separate from the mind. And I believe this, not this verse, but maybe in another one, that we know the mind is separate from us, because I can tell you, think of an apple. And you can think of an apple, and I say, now to think of an orange. And you can think of an orange. Therefore, you are in control. And a lot of times we create this confusion because we think that we are our thoughts. And this is so important, because if you were to think a thought of like, oh, I wish they were dead, right? And then you go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I thought that. I'm such a horrible person. You just associated yourself with being your mind, and your mind being you. And that because that thought went through your mind, that makes you a horrible person. And we'll later learn too that the subconscious is programmed. It's programmed from the age of in the womb to 7 years old, and will continue to be programmed by first-time experiences or high emotional experiences. But often, most of our programming is coming from 0 to 7. And when we're thinking with this mind from a 0 to 7-year-old, and we're looking at things, and we're judging, and we're being petty, and we're acting childlike, we have to remember, like, that's not us. We're an adult, and that's not our thinking. Or maybe it's something someone said to you, or something you've seen over and over. And that's why it's so important for us to put pure thoughts into our body as well, and into our mind. So it goes further in this verse 2, and some verses are very short and some are very long. So verse 2 is a little bit longer. Yoga is meaning not postures. It's meaning the yogic experience. And that is gained by controlling the modifications of the mind. And that is what yoga is. So just to further clarify that. Yoga means union. In order to have a union, you must have at least 2 things. And so that means that we're at least trying to yoke the body and the mind. And so instead of them participating separately, and we see this a lot, like we get really disconnected from our body. Who's ever experienced where you were unaware of sensations that were going into your body, that you were no longer aware of a gut instinct, right? Like, we want to use yoga, and this is where those physical postures help, is to link the body and the mind, because the body is so much more intelligent than the mind. So the body is like the parent, and the mind is like this wild teenager. And, you know, the body's going, hey, I know what I'm doing. Like, I have genes in me that are thousands of years old, and I can access all of that. And I have all of this amazing ability. And the mind just thinks. The mind is a tool, but it doesn't know that, because it only does what we tell it to do. And so then it goes on to break down the mind. And so when Patanjali refers to the mind, he's referring to the citta, which are different levels. And I like to think of citta, it's C-I-T-T-A. So it kind of looks like the word city. And so you think of a city, it looks like a building with lots of windows, is how I remember that. And then ahamkara, which I will just refer to as the ego. Ego in yoga is different than ego in American culture. So ego in American culture, we tend to associate with something bad. And we will further study that nothing is good, nothing is bad. It is what it is in context of what it is. So the ego just refers to the I part, which means that you start to say, I will, I want, this concept of you being separate from something else. Okay. And then our discriminative, our ability to discriminate between things, not in a judgment way, but in a way that we can recognize that the mind and the body are separate and that we are separate from our mind. That is called your booty. And it's B-U-D-D-H-I. I know, go ahead and laugh. We all laugh. And this is actually, I don't know if you've ever heard of booty yoga. They spell it B-U-T-I. To play on that word, but it's the concept is from Kundalini and this booty of B-U-D-D-I or B-U-D-D-H-I. And another stage is called manas, and I like to think like manas like my hands, and it's our senses. And so we experience the world through our senses, through our eyes, through sound, through taste, through emotions. Like there's all these senses going on. So our manas. And so the example of how you would understand all of these. So say that you're sitting in the living room and someone's cooking something in the kitchen and you go, I smell something. That's your manas, part of your mind. And then the mind says, I'm getting a fine smell from somewhere. Meaning you're noticing, you're going, oh, some like higher level thinking is the booty. And you're saying, what is that smell? I think it's cheese. How nice. What kind of cheese might it be? And you can start to guess on the cheeses. And then the booty decides, yes, it's Swiss cheese. And then Amakara, which is the ego, says, oh, I should have some. So that's where we can see like all these different levels of the mind, right? Whoever thought? Did you ever really think all these different styles of thoughts going through your mind, right? And we get stuck in some of these thought patterns a little bit more. Sometimes, we go through this phase when we're a kid and we're going, the I. And the like, I like this, I want this. And then we also get in this like kind of more philosophical, like, well, what's this? And this questioning generally happens around like middle school, high school, and that's our booty. And then the manas we're always experiencing, but typically little kids get very wrapped up in that as well. All right, so these chitti vritas are the modifications of the mind stuff. So all of these different things are what creates all those waves and ripples, right? This is what stirs up thought. We start thinking, what if, and then the eyes and the senses, and these are all the different ripples of the mind. And this is how our subconscious comes into form as we are a young child. And so let's say, for example, you imagine you haven't seen your father since birth. And when you're 10 years old, he knocks at the door. Opening it, you see a strange face, and you run to your mom and you say, Mom, there's a stranger at the door. And your mom comes to see her long-lost husband. With all the joy, she receives him and introduces him as your father. And then you say, oh, my daddy. A few minutes ago, he was a stranger, and now he's your daddy. So what changed? Just how we thought about it in our mind. So our mind is what's controlling our perception of everything. Our fears, our likes, our dislikes. I mean, just absolutely everything. And this is also present in the book called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And I use this example all the time. So he talks about if you were to go to a party, or you were invited to a party, And in one scenario, you could say, I don't want to go. That sounds like a horrible idea, but you're forced to go. And then in another situation, you're like, yeah, that sounds fun. Let's do this. And it's kind of this surprise. And in the first scenario, you go and you're like, yeah, this music's my jam. Look, there's free food. Look, there's new friends, new people to meet. Oh, wow, like this is such a great opportunity. I'm loving this. I really needed to get out of the house. And in your mind, you chose to go to the party. You chose to see it in that light. In the other scenario, you went to the party. The same music played, the same people were there. Everything was the same, but you were like, the music's too loud. Oh, I don't like this song. Oh my gosh, people keep trying to talk to me and I'm so annoyed. Nothing changed except for your perception. And so in that book, he offers, what if you looked at any situation you didn't want to do and you said, what if I was to choose this, right? So for example, say you got relocated for work and you were really upset about it because it's not what you wanted. You didn't want to leave your friends. You didn't want to leave your family. And you see yourself as being forced. And then what if you were like, oh my gosh, this is absolutely amazing. And you saw it as like this paid vacation. Either way, it's the same. But if you were just to pause and say, what if I chose this? And so I offer up, again, another journaling exercise. Like, what is something recently that has happened to you that you didn't choose and you're a little grumpy about it because you didn't choose it? Maybe being stuck inside. But what if you were to choose it? What if this was something that you purposefully chose? How would that situation change for you? And how would you show up in that situation differently? Okay. Let that simmer. The entire outside world is based on your thoughts and mental attitude. The entire world is your own projection. Your values may change within a fraction of a second. Today, you may not even want to see the one person who was your sweet honey yesterday. If we remember that we won't put that much stress on outward things. So that means to not get so stressed by these external circumstances, because we can always just change our mind. And that also lets us say, like, is things really changing as much as I think they are on the external world? Or is that really just my mind is going up and down? And so the external world is a projection of your internal world. Okay? The external world is a projection of your internal world. So whatever is showing up for you, if it's constant drama in your life, if it's constant whatever, and you keep noticing these trends, is it really all of that stuff is going on? Or is it that you keep choosing those things, or you keep seeing it that way? So how is your internal world showing up in your external world? And this journaling can just be a notice first, bring awareness to it. What is the things that are showing up in your world that you're complaining about? And is it just an internal projection? And I know that's deep. I know. So I told you this book's a good one. It's a good one. So he gives another example, and I kind of like this one. It's, so a prisoner, if you were to talk to a prisoner and you were to say, you can't wait to get outside, that they're feeling trapped, and they're feeling, this is kind of what we might be feeling right now with coronavirus. But it's telling them, like, you could be taking advantage of this. Look at all of this time that you could be reading all of these books. And nowadays, I even took a criminal justice class, and they had free college in the prison. So they could get a college degree for free and have plenty of study time. So they could choose to fret over it, or they could choose it as this inner transformation. So again, I'm like laughing at myself because I didn't think about that before. Like it's totally like our quarantine time. Okay, so moving on. That is our verse 2. So verse 2, we're breaking down the different layers of the mind. And we're saying that we choose. Our external world is a reflection of our internal world. Verse 3. Take a breath. Whew. Okay. The seer or the self abides by its own nature. And this is very much like law of attraction, manifestation stuff. Whatever it is you're focusing on is what you're going to see. If you think, let's say, you think that all SUVs are gas guzzlers and everyone that drives an SUV is just incompetent. Just an example, because I've heard that one before. Every time you see someone in an SUV, you're going to go, oh, look at that snooty person. Or you're just going to like constantly be thinking that, and you're going to see it, you're going to find it, and you're going to find validation for your belief. For women, there's no good guys out there. Well, you're going to keep validating that and making that true. But is that true? No. Because we know that there are people that have found them. I can't have money, or money is hard work. You have to work hard to get money, or all people that have, or billionaires are just horrible people. Like all these subconscious beliefs. Whatever it is that we think is true in our mind, we will validate it. We will find it. And if you've ever done a debate class, right? You can pick something and go find resources, and you can twist it to make it true for you. But then the other party can do the exact same thing. And then we're trying to debate whose side is really right. But is either side right? Normally not. It's normally a mixture of everything. It's normally not always one way or always the other. So you will always find that. So the seer knows but is not involved in it. And so this is also thought of, you know that the mind creates thoughts. It distinguishes and it desires. But the seer knows that it's not involved in it. So we can also look at recognizing our cravings and our desires and saying, who's really in control of that? And generally, it's some emotion that's bubbling up. Generally. It can also be that there's a vitamin deficiency as well. But for the most of the time, it's emotional craving. And that we're trying to flee from something because it's discomfort. And our body and our mind wants to avoid discomfort. All right. So to understand internal peacefulness, the mind that must be quiet, otherwise seems to distort the truth. Right? So that's going back to what I was previously saying. Like, it's very easy for us to distort truth, to shape things into how we want to see them. And I sometimes think of a little kid that they're like, oh, well, this happened, and that means this, and this means that, and well, so-and-so did that, so it must mean this, right? Like, think of this little child in your mind. And if you think of any examples, you can put those in here too. And this is a beautiful part here. So the mirror, say there's a mirror and it has bubbles and waves and like one of those like circus mirrors. And you're looking in it and you're just like, oh, like this looks horrible. Or maybe there's a lot of fog on it and you haven't polished it. And this is a common imagery that is given in a lot of ancient texts as well, as to polish your mirror. Because that's our reflection. And again, the external world is reflecting our internal world. And so when we can polish our mirror, we can see past the distortions. And so how do we think that we polish our mirror? I'm gonna throw this one out here. Get you all involved. How do you think we polish our mirror? The mirror of our mind. So go ahead and comment. The seer, or true you, reflects in the mind, which is your mirror. Normally you can't see the true self because your mind is colored. I like to say it like our lenses, our films that we have over our eyes, and we're seeing the world in a different way. If the mind is dirty, it says, I'm dirty. If it's polished and shining, it says, I'm beautiful. And so how do we think that we cleanse the mind? That means that if you think you are your reflection in the mind, if the mind is like a lot of waves on a surface lake, you will see a distorted reflection. If the mind of the mental lake is muddied or colored, you will see yourself as muddy or colored. Yes, meditation, breath, yoga, like our physical practice. These are how we cleanse. This is how we cleanse. And journaling even. Doing something where we're paying attention on purpose. Any of that. And meditation can be that. Pranayama, breathing exercises can be that. Being in the moment with our physical yoga practice. Yes, good. Positive affirmations for sure. Anything where we can be in the moment. We can be true to ourselves and provide this cleansing where we're releasing the negative. Or even just sometimes it's releasing the tension. I don't know if I've done this where I'm driving and suddenly I notice like my shoulders are up to my ears and I'm like, I know I was thinking about something. I don't know what I was thinking about. What got me so tense? Oh yes, good one, Bethany. Yes, gratitude for sure. And that is one of, well, it's kind of in both, but the yamas and niyamas as well. As practicing gratitude is huge. Not only in our own self-development, but they've recently in the past few years done like clinical studies on this. And this is the only way that they can actually measure people, their happiness quotient. Was the only people that had a higher happiness quotient were people that actively practice gratitude. And I was listening to a recording yesterday and it was talking about people who do gratitude and positive affirmations and they feel more in the present moment, live longer, and they live healthier while they're longer. So their mind is more at ease. So that means like less Alzheimer's, dementia, that kind of thing. All right. And then playful exercise is the other thing that does that. So good things to know. And that's like, if you have any yoga classes with me or you go back and watch some of my yoga videos, majority of my yoga classes make jokes. We wiggle, we shake, we have fun. We don't want to create this rigidity because we want this plasticity, this neuroplasticity to happen as well. And we want to free ourselves from all the tension that we're in all day. And so if you had something that was soft, like rubber, and we were to hit it, it doesn't create as much rigidity, yes, but like it doesn't create as much impact. Versus if you hit something that is very firm, it kind of like resonates through it. You almost get a chill up your body, right? We're hoping to create that with the mind and with the body so that the effects of some external stimulus, if it comes up and, you know, that happens sometimes in life, it's like whoosh. And it's just kind of like, okay, that happened. And it's not so much that you're ignoring it or you're just passively standing by. It's that you're not allowing it to disturb your peace. You recognize it, you deal with it, you still have boundaries and you still like deal with it and you respond to it instead of reacting. Versus if something came up and just kind of hit you in the life, like you'd be like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe this, and you're freaking out and it's disturbed your whole entire day and it had these gigantic ripple effects. in domino effects into the rest of your life. Versus if it just kind of boop, and there's just, you know, some little ripples in the water and maybe a couple little thoughts, and then you tame it back down and you go on. Because happiness is an inside job. And so there's the happiness that is internal and unwavering. And then there's conditional happiness, which is it's sometimes nice, right? But conditional happiness is like, oh, I bought a new dress and I'm happy, and then I put it on and it ripped and now I'm sad. And so we start having these like really big ups and downs versus I am happy and content with myself, and I'm feeling grateful, and I'm feeling peace, and something external happens and I'm like, well, that sucks, but I still have all these other great things. So I'm not going to let that ruin or poison everything else that I have. And so that's external conditional happiness versus unconditional happiness. And I think that's what we're all looking for, right? Like, there is no sin in searching for happiness. And, you know, often happiness we get from self-growth. Self-growth and self-development, when we feel like we're growing and we're developing, is when we have a lot of this unconditional happiness. Also, when we're helping others and we're participating in community and we feel like we have purpose. But a lot of that is as we self-develop. And it's when we start to feel stagnant or we feel like we've like backtracked. That's normally when a lot of suffering happens. So to know that learning and self-development is huge for our happiness. And this is, you know, like if we're a parent, like you've noticed this, a kid when they get their praise because they just did something well, right? Unfortunately, our current learning systems are still so regimented and done in the more like industrial stage, and hopefully that will now be changing with all of this, because children need to be learning in their interest. And yes, they still need to learn other things as well, but learning needs to be this dynamic self-growth process and not this memorize this, and if you're not great at memorizing, you fail, right? Like, that doesn't feel good. It feels stiff. It feels in the box, and our body and our mind doesn't like that. Our body and mind needs to be creative and expressive. That is how we become more human or more spiritual in a human body. We're not meant to be contained so much. We're already contained in a human body. We don't need to be contained more than that. And we see this, right? Like, this kind of stuff was illegal for a really long time. In many countries, people weren't allowed to believe that they can change their own world, that they have the ability for all of this. Yes, joy. And in yoga, we often call it bliss. And not in the bliss of like, dude, I'm blissed out. But as in that joy, that bliss, that happiness, that peace. And that's at our center, at our core. Good. And yeah, it shouldn't be dependent on any of those, right? Because change is the only constant in life. We want everything to keep developing and keep improving. And there's the cycle of birth and death, and it happens with our seasons, and it happens with our food, and it happens like with everything. And we want these cycles to continue to flow, and we don't want to get attached to any of that. We don't want to get so attached to a person, place, or thing that it disturbs our happiness. That yes, it can evoke emotions, and emotions are not bad. Emotions are good. Like, if you feel saddened by the death of someone, like, that's okay, but it shouldn't take away so much peace so that you're devastated that you can no longer function, right? Like, that becomes an attachment. It's okay to grieve, and it's okay to be sad, and it's okay to need to take a break and take care of yourself when things like that happen. But it's another level when we're so deeply attached that we attach our happiness to that. Okay. And then, so that's pretty much our first study. So let's go ahead and start getting some questions going. So I'm going to kind of review just a little bit as you might be thinking. So the first verse was that we have to have action, that we have to have practice, because we cannot reach a goal by mere words alone or just studying the philosophy. So in that sense, like, how are you going to take action from what we've talked about with just these 3 verses? Just these first 3 verses, and there's 200. Out of 3 of these, what are some action that you can take to put these into play, to put this philosophy into play? And then it goes on in verse 2 to talk about that the mental modification is what the goal of yoga is, for us to be able to control our mind. And this is where we can see that meditation is the goal of the physical postures, right? Like, the physical postures are to get us into meditation so that we can do this work. And so if you need to start with the physical postures, start with the physical postures, if that is part of your practice. But the goal is to get to the meditation. So if you can get to the meditation, that's going to be the most important part. I just gave you a hint there. So the chitta, which is like all the different facets of the mind. And the mind is the ego, which is the I part. The buddhi, which is the like, okay, this is red, this is blue, this is green. The manas is the manas, like the taste and the smell and the senses. And then the mental modifications, which is those subconscious beliefs, our veil that we have over us, those, the coloring, like where we see the world, our story, is the chittas vritas, or vrittis. And everything can change in an instant, right? Like, everything can change in an instant. And for example, oh my gosh, maybe you're eating something and you think it's delicious, and then someone says, oh, so-and-so just prepared that food and didn't wash their hands, and then suddenly the food is disgusting. And then they're just like, oh, I'm just joking. And then your mind's like, oh, I don't know if I like this or not like this. Nothing changed. You still thought it was delicious, and when you didn't know. So, like, it's just our perception. Everything is our perception. And then we covered verse 3, which was a lot all packed in one. So we will validate whatever we think. We will validate it. And if we see a distortion in that mirror, then we're going to have that distortion. So it's important to cleanse the mirror daily. All right, so what are your practices? What are your takeaways? If you don't have any questions, tell me what your takeaways are from these 3 verses, 1, 2, and 3. What did you find that was really important? What stuck out to you in this? And what are you planning to implement? Did it change anything that you already knew? Did it remind you of something that you already knew? Did something or a certain word hit home? And how are you going to implement this? Right? So there's many different ways that we could implement this. There's, right, we talked about meditation, there's yoga, there's gratitude, there's just noticing, there's journaling, there's all these different things that you can do to help polish your mirror, to become aware. And are you in a spot in life where you feel like you could devote a regular 20 minutes every day to do that? And it might be a mixture of a few different things. And so the best practice is always to do it daily, whatever it is, at the same time, every day. You will typically do really well for the first 2 or 3 days. And then the mind, the ego starts to go, no, we don't like change. We were good. We like to stay the same way we were. Like little temporary things are fine, but no, we like to stay in the comfort zone. And so then you'll start to forget. And so you need to set reminders for yourself, different ways to remind yourself, but also if you can tie it to a current habit that you already have. So maybe it's brushing your teeth. So something that you already do that you don't have to think about. Maybe you want to be mindful while you brush your teeth and you want to really be there and feel each tooth and really try not to think of something else while you're doing it, but just to fully be there with all the sensations. And to imagine yourself just rinsing away and scrubbing your body. Good. Mindful breathing, pausing, how to implement the practice consistently. Yeah. So that is the hard part, because again, our mind wants to seek comfort, because our mind says it has this concept that change is bad. But again, change is the only thing that is constantly happening. And we live in a world where change is constantly happening. So allowing ourselves to say like, okay, I'm implementing this new change. This new change is going to make us better. And just to keep telling yourself that. And I often would do, I would wake up and I'd be like, I'm a person that wakes up every morning and meditates. And I would still skip mornings, but I would tell myself that. I'm a person that wakes up in the morning and meditates. I drink hot lemon water and I sit and I meditate every morning. And then I would start to tell people that. And I was saying it so much that I was telling my body that that's what we do. And eventually it became very true. And I would wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh yes, I have to meditate, because I was saying it to myself all the time. So the mind loves repetition. And typically we have other habits that we do repetitively, right? Good, Beth. I'm so glad to hear that. Or Bethany. I don't know if you go by Beth, if Beth's good. So good. I like that you're not defined by your thoughts. And we'll have ebbs and flows of that too, right? And it's still always very surprising, even for me, where I will not recognize things, because again, it becomes very, very just habitual. And we've done so much work sometimes that we don't see other little blind spots. And so we can do this by asking ourselves, like, where are the blocks in our life? Because there's always room for growth. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with us, but there's always room for growth. And that's what we should be, according to yoga. We should always be looking for ways to keep improving. And so typically we say, like, what is it that if we do complain about anything, or if we do wish, if we're always wishing for something, so maybe we're in that positive mindset and we're like, oh, I really wish I could make more money, or I really wish I could have this job, or I really wish, whatever that is, there's something blocking us to get there. And that's typically another type of mental modification that comes in, going back to those subconscious thoughts that show up. So if you're looking for something more stimulating, that's a whole other avenue. But good, yeah. And there's always the just to keep up the good work too, right? Like maintenance is a real thing as well. So seeing where those areas are. Okay. Well, that is our day one. I know I went over a lot for our intro, which was to help keep this a little shorter. And then tonight we are jumping into a little group, which I am getting ready to make. And we get to live video chat. And so I get to see all of your all's faces. Woohoo! And we can talk and ask questions, or you could share your experience as well. And so I'm going to try to get that pulled up while we're still talking. Oh, good. Yes, I love like the nature. That's so important. Yeah, I used to do that. I haven't been doing it as much. Again, I have my ebbs and flows too, but I was, for a while, I would do my morning meditation. And then I would have every Friday night, I would do an hour. And I would do, yeah, my crystals, my rituals, all of that. And I would just have, I don't know why this is not finding this. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. So I would have all of my rituals. And when I say rituals, I have my chanting, I have my breathing, I have mudras, I have all of those. There's all these different ways. And then looking at chakras and balancing the chakras, and again, it can be maintenance. Like if you've done the cleansing and you're clear and you're just studying more and just in this place of holding the healing light, that's so beautiful. And to keep that up again is a maintenance, and to keep growing so that we don't become stagnant. Keeping up that momentum is so beautiful. So I'm so happy you're there. It's a beautiful place, and it's important because it keeps us from backtracking, and it talks about that as well, as we can easily get thrown off and backtrack quite a bit. And I've done it. I've had my fair share as well. Okay, so let's see. We're going to get a group going. If I can see how to do that. Does anyone know? Look, I think my little thing went away. Can we do the video? Oh, rooms. That's what it's called. It's called rooms. Y'all are seeing my wheels turn. Okay. So we're going to get some rooms. It says 8 members will join you instantly. Getting groups together has never been so easy, but it doesn't look like it's easy. So I'm getting ready to hop off here, and then I'm going to create a room, and it's going to show up in the group because we did this yesterday playing with it. And then we're all going to pop into the room, and we're going to have fun. Yeah, that's what I just clicked on. I clicked on rooms, and then it doesn't have a button to create the room. So maybe I need to get off. We're going to get it going. All right. See you in just a minute.